as Marie Antoinette, and because the rules are, there is permission to break the rules, and many societies do this. The result of an orgiastic style like that is men cannot trace lines of male paternity. And so there's a tremendous social glue, a tremendous force for the cohesion of community. Men don't then think in terms of my children. They think in terms of our children, the children of the group. And under the aegis of this group, this polymorphic sexual style, group child care and extended family rearing, we produced everything that we think of as human, that we value. Our art, our music, our philosophy, our sense of each other's worth, body painting, tattooing, piercing, all the accoutrements that distinguish us from animal existence were put in place when we had a different kind of mind than we have now. We didn't have a mind that favored role specialization and male dominance and anxiety over female sexual activity related to feelings of male ownership. That all came later. We became human beings in this other world of values and psychological attitudes. Problem is that, as I say, the mushroom faded. But by the time it had faded, we were no longer the wordless symbiotes of camels, the barely sentient hunters of the African plain. By the time we were finished with the mushrooms, we had language, we had social institutions, but what we began to lose was, you can get as wet-eyed as you want about it, but respect for each other, a sense of each other's individuality, a sense of love, a sense of community. And it must have been, though it happened over a long period of time, very much like what we're living through now, a sense that people are, no damn good and getting worse. A sense that, why can't we be as we once were? Where is our sense of each other? Where is our ability to care for each other? So forth and so on. Food of the Gods, in which I tell this story in the first third of the book that I've just told you. And then I show that what history is essentially is a careening, out of control effort to find our way back to this state of primordial balance. One of the things that marks us as humans that is unique is our obsessions with drugs, our ability to addict. We addict not only to substances, we addict to each other, we addict to ideologies, Marxism, Christianity, skinkism is practiced in Washington, whatever. And we addict to each other. I am a romantic with the best of them, but I can't help noticing that a broken heart and a heroin withdrawal show very similar presentations. Really, insomnia, sweating, sense of diminished self-esteem, hysteria, it's very, very similar. So a psychologist looking at a person with an addictive syndrome will say, well, you were damaged in childhood. There is some trauma there that you're trying to compensate. You're trying to compensate. Well, I'm not that keen on all this psychologizing, but I do think that we could apply this model to ourselves on a grand scale. We were essentially torn from the Gaian womb, thrust into the birth canal of history and expelled sometime around the fall of the Roman Empire into the cold, hard world of modern science, existentialism, and all the rest of it. And we have searched the planet for substances which would assuage our sense of pain. And there are things out there, alcohol, the whole morphine family, so forth and so on. But these things always have consequences. There's a price to be paid. The very knowledge of psilocybin was lost to the entire planet, except for some tribes in the Mexican mountains, for several millennia until Valentina and Gordon Wasson went in the early 1950s and found these mushrooms and brought them out. And then Albert Hoffman, who had earlier discovered LSD, synthesized the compound and made it available. That was 55. Well, by 66, all human research with these things had been forbidden. It's not that science mowed this field and moved on. It's that science has never really been here. We haven't looked at the implications of diet on early human evolution. We don't have a theory for the evolution of consciousness of any consequence. And yet, the factors I've laid out for you, increased visual acuity, an impact on sexual and social behaviors, triggering of glossolalia-like phenomena in the presence of a boundary-dissolving psychedelic experience. These are catalysts sufficiently dramatic that, inculcated into a cultural style, I think they explain a great deal about where we came from and who we are. Now, the irony of all of this is that we live in a society that has made practically any discussion of this illegal. Certainly, if I were to end this lecture by handing out doses of psilocybin, I would be gently taken by the elbow and led away forever. The Western mind is particularly phobic of this subject. I mean, we have bent our laws so that people can jump out of airplanes in pursuit of thrills, so that they can bungee cord off major highway bridges and freeway overpasses. So concerned are we to fulfill society's need for thrills. But this is something else. It provokes all kinds of alarmed reactions, and perhaps you believe unfairly. I think that when you examine the situation, it's possible to understand very clearly why this is such a social issue. Because what these things do, if you look, and now I'm slightly broadening my graph to include other psychedelics besides psilocybin, but psilocybin is certainly true in all cases. What these things do, if you had to generalize 100,000 psychedelic experiences, the ones where people thought they were gone, the ones where people had to be taken to the ER room and have their stomach pumped, all of them, if you generalize, what these substances do is they dissolve boundaries. They dissolve boundaries. If you love it, you'll love it. If you hate it, you'll hate it. But that's what they do. They dissolve boundaries. Now, the reason this provokes a lot of social anxiety is because all societies are about the maintenance of boundaries. It doesn't matter whether you're, a stockbroker in New York, a Zen monk in Kyoto, a Hasid in Jerusalem. Your society is held together by boundaries and definitions. And anything which dissolves those boundaries and introduces relativity into cultural modeling is felt to be threatened because we like to believe that our reality is somehow sanctioned, that this is how it should be. But in fact, that's just a cultural judgment. All cultures think that their culture represents a sanctioned reality. It doesn't. It just represents the current download of their linguistic enterprise. Um, at the core of the Western anxiety about boundaries is something that we are very proud of, that we believe we invent. Sometimes we call it the democratic individual. Uh, we say no Eastern society could have produced this. We took this from the Greeks, we perfected it through the Romans, we brought it up through the medieval period. John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and all those folks fixed it up for us in the 18th century. Thomas Jefferson ironed out the wrinkles, and modern America is the shining example of what you can do if you empower the ego, the citizen, the individual. We want nothing of tribalism, still less of collectivism, and God forbid, nothing whatsoever to do with communism. See, all these things set us going. Uh, but in fact, the ego is appropriate only to a certain point. I mean, yes, we need egos so that when you take someone to dinner at a reasonable restaurant, you place food in your mouth, not their mouth. This is what the ego is for. It tells you who pays. um, but in fact, what the ego is the return to consciousness of this psychic structure related to the patterns of dominance. And the way I think of the ego is it's like a cyst or a calcareous growth or a tumor that gets going in the personality. And if not treated, it becomes chronic. And then there is no cure. There can only be, a certain amount of maintenance and medication of it, but it's incurable, except unless we resort to not only non-prescription drugs, but drugs currently illegal. In other words, the psychedelics, through this boundary dissolving function, dissolve that boundary as well. And so they promote a larger sense of the world than the values of capitalism, competitiveness, object fetishism, property acquisition, and the bottom line, empower. So the issue, as was always since the 60s forward, I think, is not simply an issue of religious freedom or an issue of an eccentric minority social practice being tolerated by the majority, the way they tolerate handing out pamphlets in airports or something like that. The issue is, in fact, what kind of people shall we be? And then what kind of society shall we put in place? And that's why my theory of evolution is not simply a dry footnote on an issue that involves anthropologists, primatologists, and biologists, but it turns into a political issue because our unhappy, addicted, ego driven condition has become not simply the source of our own unhappiness. That was bad enough. But now it's the source of great discomfort and dislocation for all life and human society on the planet. We are out of control. We are basically severely addicted to things and cannot stop ourselves. And we know, or we should know, that there is not enough petroleum, heavy metal, so forth and so on in the planet to give all the thing addicts all the things that we know they must have in order to be happy. We have spread this intellectual virus from pole to pole, to Turkmenistan and Borneo, to the upper Amazon and to the Tajiks. Everybody wants kids, you know, everybody wants the pause that refreshes. Uh, what are we going to do about this? Well, so far, we've been treating it like an endless garden party. There's no serious plan on the table to deal with this at all. Uh, I think that the momentum of human history is pushing us inexorably toward some kind of day of reckoning, and in which we are either going to have to turn consciously toward brutality and selfishness and say, well, let India go, let Bangladesh go, triage, costs too much, can't possibly fix the problem. In order to maintain our locked compounds and our 50 channels of television and the endless availability of arugula, we have to let India go. We're going to have to turn that way. In other words, each consciously participate in a choice to brutalize the human enterprise, or we're going to have to seriously talk about very major restructurings of our society. And I don't really know how we do that. I was living in Northern California a couple of years ago when they wanted to close an airbase near here, and the newspapers were filled with for weeks with analysis of whether Western civilization could absorb this hammer blow at the very heart of its institutions of closing one friggin' airbase, for crying out loud. That's not my idea of major change, you know? We may have to give up some of our pretty things. We may have to discipline some of the irresponsible social philosophies that run amok among us. And no, I don't mean the advocacy of psychedelic plants. I mean the Roman Catholic Church's position on population control in the third world. And the Germans take quite a knock for the Holocaust, but the Catholic Church manages to push more people into death, disease, and degradation every year than the Holocaust managed in its entire show. And it's thought rather crass to even mention the fact. It seems to me, as long as these Catholic bishops can show their face in public, that we are in complicity with mass murder. It's not pleasant news, but what are you going to do about it? Islamic fundamentalism, another bunch of knotheads with an anti-human agenda. What are we going to do about this? Are we going to go gently into that good night of planetary chaos?
The owners of this country don't care about the poor and the owners of this country. But is this Karl Marx talking to me? The owners of this country are the voters of this country. You're wrong about that. Aren't the owners of this country the voters of this country? No, they're not. Listen, politics, these elections are a charade. It's a charade. Okay. It is, they are not true. I'll tell you, just listen. Learn something. Elections and politicians are in place in order to give Americans the illusion that they have freedom of choice. You don't really have choice in this country.
And let me ask you this about looting. Would you agree that there was two kinds of looting? That there was the kind where people were desperate because they were starving and maybe were taking food at the store. And then there were some people who were taking stereo. Yeah. Would you agree that there was two kinds?
Yeah, people were walking away with televisions.
Would you agree that there was those two kinds of looting?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then it's not wrong for the president to issue an ultimatum that there was zero tolerance and thereby encourage his right-wing flacks in the liberal media to go ahead and say to suggest that we shoot people on sight as if in the middle of this crisis where so many people are dying already, what we need to do is shoot Tyrone because he's getting out of Circuit City with some soggy tweeters. And I think Tyrone always had soggy tweeters.
I have an addendum to it. The real looting in this country takes place in the transfer of the wealth from the poor to the rich. I'm sorry that you don't like class and the truth, my friend, but you're stuck with it. Class and the poor have been systematically looted in this country. The rich have been made richer under this criminal, fascist president and his government.
George, I think you know what fascism is. You know what fascism is? What Nazis are?
No, sir. Wait, sir. When fascism comes to America, it will not be in brown and black shirts. It will not be with jack boots. It will be Nike sneakers and smiley shirts. Smiley. The fascism. Germany lost the Second World War. Fascism won it. Believe
And actually,
me, my friend.
fascism is when corporations become the government.
Yes.
And that's sort of what we have. And poverty has gone up. So 17
in this quick. George, you think that looting is looting okay if there's no hurricane?
First of all, property.
Whatever you want.
we're talking
I
about
have no problem with that. May I be honest?
No
with you?
problem
I have no problem with that. It's true.
Oh, wait a second. We're talking looting. We're not saying, this reminds me of the OJ situation. It wasn't that OJ was innocent. We all knew he killed his wife. Okay? It's not that looting is good. We all know looting is bad. It's the priorities. It's the fact that white people obsessed on one black guy getting away with a crime once when it had worked in reverse 1 billion times. The same way they're obsessing about a few people getting away. We're in the middle of this much bigger crisis. It's a matter of what's proportional. I think that's what we're saying. No one is defending. When you say, I don't care what that is always what these kind of commentators say. I don't care what their race is. As if things were even to begin with. Bill O'Reilly and his ilk are saying things like, you know what? If you just would have gotten an education, you wouldn't be in this situation. As if it's easy to get an education in situations where there's so much segregation.
Bill, I completely agree with you on that.
Chaos, extreme distortion of class structure, defense of what we have at any cost against those who have nothing. There doesn't seem to be any other plan
spend the
on
rest
the
of their lives
horizon.
paying 18% interest on something that
Arthur
costs
Kessler,
$12.50.
who
And they
probably
didn't
never
like it
thought,
when they got
I
home
should
late.
say, I guess, a little bit
Not
about
too bright, folks.
himself.
Not
Very
too bright.
conservative
But if they talk
character.
to one
You'll
another,
recall
these
he
guys
was
really wanted
a
something
Marxist
rationally
who
just
turned
to
on Marxism and led a very interesting intellectual life.
Right away, they start
He wrote
talking
a
about
book
education. That's the
30
big
years
issue.
I grew up in a
Education.
small town
It's-
in
we need more money for
Colorado.
education.
He made a case
teachers.
similar to mine, but a little
We need more testing
circumstance.
for the kids.
He
I said, well,
observed,
you know, we
and
tried
human
all
beings
that.
are hardwired
But
for
some can't pass the test.
homicide
So don't you worry about that. We're
genetic
gonna
code.
lower
This
the
is what
passing
we
grades.
wanted, because
That's
this
what they do in a lot
was
of these
something
schools.
we
They
had
lower the
to
passing
deal
grades.
with
More kids have
at
passed.
some
More
point.
kids
Very
passed. The school
prone
looks
to
good.
some
Everybody's happy.
sections
The IQ
view.
of
He
the
didn't
country slips
believe
another 2 or
in
3
one
points.
obsession
Pretty
gave
soon,
way,
all you'll
but
have
he
to get
reached
into
the
college
same
is a
of
fucking
rock
pencil.
collecting that I have, which
Yeah, pencil,
is
get a
we
fucking
need a
there. It's physics.
pharmacological intervention
Then everyone
on
wonders why 17 other
anti-girl
countries graduate
behavior,
more scientists
or
than
we
we
are
do.
not
Hidden behind
with
3 things.
I
The flag,
there have
Bible,
been
and
some
the
dystopias based on drug butterfly intervention on it was fairly that you all remember Brave New World, where every time anybody raised their voice, they were given
But there's a reason.
Graham
There's a
so
reason. There's a reason for this.
told a gram is better than a
Reasonable
dance.
to suck it.
Yeah, so nobody ever our remote ancestors exploring
Well,
that's a
something
terrible
like
drug.
that.
Let's not introduce that. Would have encountered. The bad news is we've had it for decades. And we had millions of people in larval growing warehouse alive, many in their little dung growing so-called coprophytic, labeling the garbage into their minds. The average American drinks 5.5 hours a day, so imagine how badly distributed are these mushrooms. To think I'm sure that our early ancestors, if that were also tested other countries, people were loaded, they were testing at that level of they were digging bags day after day after day. We would do, and I'm sure there were many no names, but we can so my I can't control steroids in modern Korea is the family of a hungry band of primates that come upon a patch of vegetators that are heavy.
We are the creators.
It would raise holy
It's not we are the creators.
Human genetic history is the story of many such encounters with mutagenic influences in the environment. Most of
It's a
them
beautiful soul.
have any, but in some
Grace.
cases, there would have been salutary results. Advantage
It's a gift. We don't deserve
animals that accept
Well,
and I want to particularly emphasize psilocybin because I believe it is the key. We're looking for in our
Thank God,
evolution. Normally takes place.
as we know that
It's
church
going to be an unusual situation. Perhaps the need to grow older and shift. We don't know.
So what
Or
does it
perhaps
mean?
contact with an unusual food item or drug containing plant. But it was something unusual. If it weren't unusual, it wouldn't have taken this planet 1.5 billion years to bring forth its first
And who are we?
species. What is that? Well, so let's look at psilocybin then a little more. My personal journey. It has a number of properties, not specifically related to its psychoactivity, that make it an ideal candidate for a
That's an
catalyst
interesting
for the
point.
emergence of
I'll read it
consciousness
out
in an
loud.
advanced animal.
For everybody who's
First of
Instagram
all,
still listening,
and at the early stage of human
religion
invasion
is
of
for those
this
who are
grassland
scared.
environment,
Spirituality is for those
we were testing
who have already
we
been
would planet is tested this food. I've seen these things
well put.
place in the Amazon after the rain. They are silvery with blue purple shading. They are the most
So,
dramatic thing.
simultaneously, we can either be living in hell
are not. Certainly they would have
or we could be living in heaven.
I've seen
Our choice.
investigating how large is flipping them over because
What do we want to choose?
a large missile underneath. So cow pies
In the
are a
moment.
natural vector
Quintess.
for hungry baboons. So that everything is that over the last
The only thing that we know is now.
Okay, and the first quality of psilocybin isn't specifically related to
The
its
past
psychoactivity, is that in
is a
small
creation of the mind.
doses that are
The future
kind of like if you were just sort of eating it along with
has not happened.
grassroots small
Oh,
bugs of
keep us from living
so on. Visual acuity is in other words all these things.
in this moment.
Edge detection, the diet.
Yes.
So now, those you don't have to be a smallest to figure out that if you're in a highly competitive evolutionary environment, in grass,
Facts are interesting.
an
Yes.
environment
When
characterized by large
opinions worth
predators
nothing.
hunting cats, and also characterized that having
the
increased sensitivity to edge
theory.
I thought might make a difference between whether or not you live to tell
Because
the
those
tale
facts
or you become somebody independent.
could be
Or
all wrong.
it would certainly make the difference between going home empty-handed and
Considering everything that we know,
with it. So
We've
a
learned
factor which enhanced toxicity
everything
on
we
those
think we
animals
know
that
in our minds.
into their food chain,
We've
they
either
would
read,
have a slightly
been told to
increased
us,
chance of evolutionary success
interpreted,
as opposed to the non-psilocybin members of their group.
confused.
And this increased hunting success would tend to
So I put it
outweigh
out to
the
you
non-psilocybin using members.
in this conversation we're having.
At slightly higher doses, there was a
Maybe
high
facts.
of but it was
I'm
all
learning.
alkaloids are what are called CNS, central nervous system stimulants. That
Are steering us off
that
course.
they produce arousal. And in
Slightly.
sexually extremely active animals like primates, arousal means erection that all male, usually followed by pain.
Because to truly understand,
What anthropologists and primatologists call successful instances
we need to unlearn
the truth. The non-psilocybin using members
Explore
of the
truth.
population. They're now definitely moving to the rear of the string. They're not
I
having
think I
as
know.
much sex, so they're not having as many offspring.
I know I
And
don't
in terms of rising
True.
numbers, those that have some allergy, prejudice, or fears of the molecules being
But always
chanted out of more population. And 20 years, well, over the years, at
True.
still higher dose for this
It's constant.
doses of 20 milligrams or more.
But always mutate.
4 grams dry, 45 grams wet, and
Because now
we have
it's
hunting
different.
is out of the question. There's a lot
And
of
what we've experienced in the
sex is something you can consider,
True.
but it's out of the question. Some of it is component. And you
Our
are
fear
basically nailed to the ground in a state of mind, and which we all of our representation.
So what is this truth that we speak of, Twin
And
Button?
all the rest of it haven't clue as to what it is, what it means.
Put it in your words.
Manifestations of it, full-blown psychedelic experience of which we can only speak in terms of religious erophany, symphony, catarsis, all those other great Greek words. And
Controls
that
many of us.
so, in other words, we like
The majority of the population on this earth
and
is
it
controlled by
is
fear.
therefore the basis for religion. Well, there are 6 million of us, so
Fear of losing relationships.
and that leads
Fear of
what remote primate ancestors.
someone else's opinion on you.
We've always been in a group of five called the holy, the new for the balance and
This is why,
and
Quinn, you and
and
I are
this is
here.
very much none of them have elected
Fuck 'em all.
psychedelic
Agreed.
and
Fuck all the ideologies.
so my notion, these
Fuck all. Fuck all religions. Spiritual teachers that claim to know. Because when you say you know,
and I'm very happy to share all that right down.
then I know you don't know.
That's very important to our people's personal and technology. At first, I had great enthusiasm.
I keep going back to I.
Because I felt I was alone. complaint yet. Later, the French sociologist Jean Denis wrote
Who am I?
famine under which
I am we.
printed right on it. Now, he says,
We don't understand.
psychedelic exploration
We may as well be talking to a wall, eh?
process explaining what he's saying around
Quinn says,
so that is been taken care of.
I don't know.
And so what
You don't know.
and
I
is
don't know.
for me, what all these years of psychedelics was a
You
new
just blew my
model
mind,
of how
Brent.
reality works, a new model of what the world is. And so what people are going around saying is, then you have all the time and I represent
So,
remember when we were given kids
in the interest of
there's a genre of cartoon technology the beard is
which we can discuss,
sign which says something, usually the end is near. So right now we're going through
I will be using this tool called we put inside
I
box
really
an
will
hour
extend
this
life
conversation.
I extend say 100%. And that's what we are experiencing here at the end of the 20th century, which we call
Because we can always pick it up another time at a later date. The message is the same.
Is in fact it's far more profound than mere understanding.
Here is the root of all our problems.
And our best people are working on that problem. The drugs of the future will be much more like
Maybe.
the computers of the future.
What do I know?
The biological evolutionary.
What is this Canadian-born 48-year-old man?
And both simultaneously.
Let's assume
And where we are
he knows nothing.
is toward the solid state fiber where the very laws
Let's assume that we all know nothing. If we care about salvaging.
And I am completely aware of how
That we got.
First of all, I always not far unless you build. There's never any percentage in saying that there's just no juice. Nevertheless, is being when you begin to ontology. That'll always be
We are very violent.
there are only a certain number of intellectual marks to what is
There's no need for war.
Poverty.
There's an eternity.
This year's recipient of the Canadian Arts Award, as well as more about the history of the award and its
There's
consequences.
Outlandish explanation of reality.
Unlimited things
And that's
that we can create.
So, what does this do? What is the consequence?
This money
Just
those who have
This universe is
Tonight, direct from our nation's capital, it's the 11th annual Sandy Center Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. Celebrate Lewis Black, Margaret Jones, Mandy King, Dennis Leary, Bill Maher, John Stewart,
Still.
and Wilmington. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
Evening, donors. What a great day to be
More
presidents who can speak English. We will attempt to do justice.
And it doesn't
And that requires us to work clean, because you know if George while we are talking right now, and that you're right, guy yourself
somehow it matches. I just, my life matters, my family, the culture, the human enterprise. If iota matters at all, matters is
he also said he wanted
as a primary today tonight. Of the tragedy
Mark Twain
will be
Prize.
immense because the failure is
What an honor to be
how this
associated
happened is not
with Twain.
talk about tomorrow. That's an
Especially
interesting
for
story. There are resources, cloud technologies available right now. Which
Now, you know, today we think of Mark Twain as the author, but in his own lifetime, he was
could we don't want
in fact, you could divide Twain
which is the way we make the conjure in the giant mind
most people
constantly
and the late stage,
nature original
and the late stage,
nature original built by
Mark Twain, George also was an author who wrote for it
to a long shot
incredible
whole
thing
natural thing together to the world is entering into a phase of recession.
I wish her luck.
This is not since the 1970s.
George Carlin was called America's class.
Christians have been ignorance is no longer an excuse. And the last 100 years has laid at our doorstep the tools necessary for an archaic reconstruction of society, human values within that society. It's inconceivable that Western industrial capitalism could run on another 500 or 1,000 years. It will not continue as it has. It will deteriorate under the pressure of resource scarcity. And what few democratic values for reasoned discourse it's perfectly reasonable will be the first that our remote ancestors exploring the new environment it's very, very important would have encountered people take back as you and would, that people analyze our dilemma in the context of the entire psilocybin story, from the growing in the dung of cattle, many to our dung-growing so-called coprolitic mushrooms produce psilocybin. We are among them Stropharia cubensis, which is one of the largest and pandemically distributed of these mushrooms. I'm sure that our early ancestors digging for corn with pointed sticks, and it's up to. And I'm sure there were many to relate to this situation. Ecological disasters as a consequence of this. For instance, the birth of Scaria vines grown on plantations. I'll sign books. We'll take like a Dioscorea is the family. Thank you very much for your attention. Imagine a hungry band of primates come upon a patch of sweet potatoes that are heavy in these steroids. It would raise holy havoc with their reproductive cycle. It would interfere with menstruation, ovulation, lactation, fertility, and accelerated forward. Human genetic history is the story of many such encounters with mutagenic influences
imply that it's
catastrophic,
In
detrimental.
other words, it's not that we have to do
But in
X,
some
Y, or
few
Z, that
cases,
it's on track.
there would have been
I think it is on crazier.
foods into their
A lot
food.
of
I believe it's the
getting
key.
anxious.
You see, we're looking for some
so
kind of
What
factor
needs to be
which
done
could have
is
exploded
to spread
the human
the
brain
idea
size
that
at a rate
anxiety
10
is
times faster than evolution.
It's sort of like
Normally
we
takes.
are
It's going to be an unusual situation.
because
Perhaps the
society
need to
is going
throw a
to thrash
boulder, a distant
and
resist,
resist
or perhaps
and think it's
contact
dying
with an unusual food
be
item or drug
diluted
containing
and,
plant. But
regurgitate
it was
unconscious
something
material,
unusual.
and
If
so
it
forth and
weren't
so on.
unusual,
And
it
the
wouldn't have
goal
taken this
and the
planet a
role
billion
then
and a half years to
psychedelic
bring forth
is to try and
first
spread
intelligent
calm. I'm very
species.
convinced things are gonna
Well,
get a
so
lot
let's look at
nuttier than they
psilocybin
are, and
then
they're
in
a
a
lot
little more
nuttier now
detail.
than they have been for a while.
It has
But
a number
it
of
isn't-
properties not
doesn't mean the
specifically
bad
related to
people
its
are winning
psychoactivity
or that we're
that
gonna
make it an
fumble the
ideal
ball or anything.
candidate
The
for a
mushroom
catalyst
said to me
for the
once, it
emergence
said,
of consciousness
it's
in an
like
advanced
when a
animal.
species departs
First of all,
for the stars.
Invasions,
Seeing a
land
human
environment,
birth and
proto-hominid,
you came around the
I
corner of a
should
building
say.
in your
We
daily
were
rounds and
testing
it was
foods.
happening.
We would certainly
It
have
vibrates
tested this
medical
food.
emergency.
These
I mean,
things the
blood
size
being
of dinner
shed,
plates in the
tissues
Amazon
stretched,
after a rain.
it doesn't-
They are silvery
You really have to
with
have
blue
your
and
chops
purple
together
shading.
to
They are
step
the most
back and
dramatic
say, how
in the
wonderful,
environment, whether you know
new
anything
life
about them
coming into
as,
the world.
as the psychoactive
Because,
agents are not.
that's
Certainly
not
they would
the
have been
vibe of
tested
it.
for
And I
food.
think
I've
that's
seen
the circumstance that we're in.
baboons in Kenya
This is the birth canal
investigating
to a new
cow
order.
pies and
And
flipping
at the
them
moment,
over
it looks
because
like
beetle grubs
suffocation,
nestle
constriction,
underneath. So
limitation,
cow pies are a natural
possible death.
vector for
But,
hungry baboons, so
we
that
need to
everything is in
inform
place.
ourselves
It's trivial
and get a big
to
perspective.
suggest otherwise. I would
And there's
maintain.
no way to get a big
Okay.
perspective like
The first quality of
psychedelic
psilocybin, which
experience.
isn't specifically related to its
See
psychoactivity,
history for what it
is that
It's
in
a-
small
for 25,000
doses that are the
nearly
kind you might
instantaneous
obtain if you were just sort of
from
eating
one
it
state
along with
to a
little roots.
super thin
Specifically,
transition time.
edge
But when it's
detection.
over,
You have to be a
don't,
rocket
use
scientist to
placebo.
figure out that if highly competitive evolutionary environment in grassland, an environment characterized by large predators hunting cats,
reliable
and also
information on
characterized by
psychedelic use
small
in early
ungulates
Christianity,
prey,
the
that
answer is no.
having an increased
I mean, there
sensitivity
is
to
a
edge
book
movement
by John
might
Allegro
make the
called Sacred
difference
Mushroom
between whether or not you live to
He
tell
was
the
a very
tale or you
active
become
Dead
somebody's
Sea scholar
dinner.
until he wrote
Or
that book.
it would certainly make
Uh,
the difference between
And
going
that
home
basically
empty-handed
finished his
and
career as a classicist.
taking dinner
He
home
says
with
some
you.
incredibly
So
provocative
a
things
factor
in
which
that
enhanced edge
to
detection
judge whether
on
he's
those
right
animals
or wrong,
accepting
you would
that
have to
food
read
supply into their food
serious
chain,
philologists
they would have
about
a
which
slight
I'm but apparently
psilocybin
to his
members of their
specialist
group.
colleagues,
And this
which
tend to outbreed the non-psilocybin using. In all alkaloids are what are called CNS stimulants, central nervous system stimulants. That means that they produce arousal.
But
And in sexually extremely active animals like primates, arousal means erection, usually in the male, usually followed by hanky-panky.
absence of
What
reference is not
Anthropologists and primatologists call successful instances of copulation.
like that. We do know that
Well, tending to parade, they don't have as much hunting success. They don't have as much food for themselves and their offspring. They're not having as much sex, so they're not having as many out of the breed population. In other words, 4 grams dried and up, 45 grams and up. Hunting is out of the question. Sex is something you can consider, but it's out of the question. And you are basically nailed to the ground in a state of mind which we, for all of our sophistication, our logical positivism, our superconducting colliders, and all the rest of it, haven't a clue as to what it is, what it means, what its implications are. The full-blown psychedelic experience of which we can only speak in terms of religious hierophany, epiphany, apokatastasis, and all those other great Greek words, ataraxia. In other words, we like it, but we don't understand. I haven't read the book, and it is therefore the basis for religion. He's saying artificial intelligence is impossible. So right there, you have a three-step process driven by nothing more than hunger and curiosity that leads remote primate ancestors to a confrontation with what Rupato called the holy other, the holy, the numinous, the transcendental. And this is on slightly less firm ground, but in my own personal experience and having collected psychedelic experiences lifelong, I don't have a particularly strong opinion one way or another on AI, intelligent than they are, before we settle the question of whether they can pass the Turing test. You all know the Turing test is this test. Alan Turing was a mathematician. He figured it out during World War II, and it's basically if you call X on a telephone and you can't tell whether X you have Turing tests, judges converse by telephone with computers and people and try and decide which are the computers. And it's still pretty easy because the people exhibit exasperation, incorrect, so forth and so on. Out there, once more human and artificial intelligence. There's a book, and read my mind, for God's sake. Yes, thank you. Tipler's book is the end of all speculation. Interesting computer systems of what we call human society are entirely run by machines, including very important financial sectors, market decisions, resource extraction decisions, inventory resupply decisions that of circuitry. Engineers will simply tell a computer what the circuit should do and leave the actual architecture. This means, more and more parts of the human world are being given over. How much of the world looks like the arrival concourse at an international airport. Having computers design the world might not be a bad idea. Definitely computers figure in our future. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said drugs and computers are migrating toward each other. I can imagine a world, and this is not the ultimate world by any means, a world 5, 6, 7 years in the future where the equivalent of today's advanced Macintosh would be something you glue on your thumbnail and communicate with that way. And beyond that lie enormous access through implants.
Look at this wild new video.
We're going to have to decide, how much of the monkey we want to take with us into the future. We don't want to take the homicidal killer. We don't want to take the male dominator. But we, after all, the body says our orientation in the world and our sense of ourselves is co-extensive with animal life. But how much what we call human is really is going to be a major topic for discussion from here to the end of time.
To close the loopholes, need the Mexican military to continue what they're doing and battle these cartels.
See, I don't think the media in this country, and I don't think the voter really understands
sexual ecstasy on ecstasy.
I mean, in some areas they have a higher
Oh, on mushrooms. Oh, I see.
than the Middle East.
Well, first about that, from here to the end of time, whether it be 18 years or on the shelf now, waiting for human testing and government approval, for the brain, we cannot explore neurochemistry without these drugs being a natural consequence of this program of research. MDMA is a cyclicized amphetamine like MDA, like mescaline, which is a naturally occurring compound of this type. MDMA leads to conflict resolution, relationship insights into relationships, this sort of thing. I'm not entirely convinced that it's the silver bullet of these conditions. Every drug that has made its way onto the alternative culture scene has first billed itself as a love drug. That's an unfailing market ploy to get a drug to the forefront of public attention. Cannabis was sold to as a love drug, LSD, psilocybin, ibogaine, MDMA is no different. MDMA does promote a certain kind of empathy, not a whole lot of vigorous sexual activity. In terms of what dose of psilocybin per person, probably 2 to 3 grams is this agitated, sexually active, or if no sex is happening, maybe dancing and drumming, and it's thoroughly aroused. Behind you, there was a
for the U.S. I mean, this is the level where we're at right now.
It's an absolute landscape of these drug smugglers. I mean, they find new and creative ways. Border Control does a terrific job of this, nothing summing them out. The reality is, we're not going to catch everything. They're doing their absolute best. We need more officers on the border.
This is the flying saucer debunker.
Michael, you're a former homeless.
And isn't he the one who said that he was the CIA guy for a long time?
Thank you so much for watching. Blue Dots is next, right here.
Well, this is slightly off the track, or might seem to some people to be slightly off the track. I don't know William Cooper's book, Civil War in Electric Colony. I do think years ago I accepted an invitation for the first time to go to a flying saucer conference. If you've never been to one and you're interested in flying saucers, go. You will have more insights into the phenomenon in a conference like that than in 10 years of studying it, because what's perfectly clear is that these people are self-selected for gullibility. And it's not the fault. It's just that the ticket through the front door is, would you believe this? Would you believe this? Is that, in 1947, when the first UFOs were seen, the bomb, the work toward the hydrogen bomb, people didn't know forces. And then, at this moment, cosmic awe and realization of tampering, they begin to get reports of spacecraft entering the skies of Earth. The CIA had just been founded in 48. So what they did is they put a lot of time and effort into infiltrating all these groups that claimed not going on. And as a survivor of the New Left, I can tell you, when the government gets interested in infiltrating, I mean, there 2 out of every 3 members of SDM membership. So I believe that what happened was these flying saucer groups were massively infiltrated by the government in the course of its pursuing its constitutional obligation to maintain the public welfare. And by 54 or 55, the government was perfectly convinced that whatever flying saucers were, they did not pose a threat to the integrity of the air defenses of North America. And that was their real concern. But bureaucracy, weird creatures, they really exist only to perpetuate themselves. So at some point inside these agencies, they must have had to face the fact that they had massively infiltrated a bunch of very flakier, or keep going with it because they now had a group of people self-selected for gullibility, technology, propaganda, experiment, and so forth and so on, because their friends and relatives had already written them off as completely untrustworthy. Who would believe them no matter what story they told? It's that they had become part of something that had become part of something that had become part of something, and they never really had a fighting chance. Do strange lights haunt the skies of Earth? You bet their booties they do. But the flying saucer cults are a social phenomenon and largely unrelated to whatever this anomaly is. So, yeah. It's perfectly reasonable to suggest that our remote ancestors exploring the new environment of the grasslands would have encountered, as you no, I think it would go the other way, moving toward a time when our technology growing in the dung of cattle. Many, in other words, dung coprolitic shrooms produce psilocybin 71 among them stroperic events. That is one of the largest pandemic. But on the other hand, I could of these imagine as that our early ancestors future world also tested, say, 500 or a billion. They were testing everything. They were digging for people of all races, political persuasion, and I'm sure there were many preferences and so forth and so on. For instance, the birth control steroids in modern birth control pills on primates that become upon a patch of sweet potatoes that are heavy in these steroids. Later, that computer would interfere with menstruation, ovulation, lactation. Human genetic history is and the story of many such encounters with mutagenic influences in the environment. Most really of them computers are doing is they're making what we call the collective unconscious. But in some few cases, there would have been solitary potentially accessible through the network animals that accept these. You know, I'm still getting used to the idea and I want to particularly emphasize psilocybin because I believe it's the key. I could get we're looking for some kind of factor which could have exploded the human brain size at a rate 10 times faster. I don't have an evolution normally takes place. So if there is it's going to be an unusual situation. Perhaps the need to throw a boulder distance after, or perhaps contact with an unusual food item or drug-containing plant. But it was something unusual. It weren't unusual. It would have taken this planet 1.5 billion years to bring forth to point at other websites and bring resources. Well, so let's look at psilocybin. This is a technology which is going to turn out to not be. It has a number of properties, not going to be specifically related to showing psychoactivity, that make it an ideal candidate for a catalyst. The emergence of consciousness in an advanced animal is the first human invasion of this new grassland environment. A culture cannot evolve. We were testing food. We would certainly have tested this food. And I've seen these things the size of dinner plates in the Amazon. They are silvery with blue and purple shading. They are the most dramatic in the environment, whether you know anything about them. As the psychoactive agents are not. Certainly they would have been tested for food. I've seen baboons in Kenya investigating cow pies and flipping them over because beetle grubs nestle in the future. We won't. So cow pies are a natural vector for hungry baboons, so that everything is in place. By the time it's trigger 25, suggest otherwise. Our website will be the size of the American Museum of Natural. The first quality of psilocybin, which isn't specifically related to psychoactivity, is getting it along with little roots, small bugs, and so forth and so on. Visually is improved into the imagination. And we will now imagine you don't have to be a rock climbing law to figure out that if you're in a highly competitive evolutionary environment, but in grassland, an environment characterized by large predators hunting cats, also characterized by small ungulate prey, that having an increased sensitivity to edge movement might make the difference between whether or not you live to tell the tale or you become somebody's dinner. Or it would certainly make the difference between going home empty-handed and what I urge taking dinner home. So it's a factor which enhanced edge detection on those animals accepting that supply in their food chain. They would have a slightly increased chance of evolutionary success. And this increased hunting, and if you want to go large scale, will tend to out the psilocybin. After the brain, at the slightly higher dose, heavily innervated organ, highly sexed animals, and anxiety has a lot of people have anxiety in the first hour. They produce arousal. They believe that something in sexually extremely active animals like primates, arousal really is erection, usually for the male, usually followed by hanky-panky. You should take mushrooms. What on an empty anthropologists and primatologists call successful instances of copulation. You can try another drug. Well, if you want. But what there is, it's a second business tending something to be said for the non-psilocybin using members of the population. Also, they're now definitely moving to the rear of the parade. So, they don't have as much success. They don't have as much food for themselves. Population. Well, and at still higher doses to psilocybin are approaching effective doses of 20 milligrams or more. In other words, 4 grams dried or something like that. 45 grams wet and allergy. If you're going to get into hunting is out of the question. Sex is something you can consider, but it's out of the question. There is, and you are basically nailed to the ground in a state of mind. We, for all of our sophistication, our logical positivism, our super deducting, super colliders, and all the rest of it, haven't and then really put the as to what it is, what it means, what its implications are. The full-blown psychedelic experience of which we can only speak in terms of religious hierophany, epiphany, apokatastasis, and all those other great Greek words, ataraxia. In other words, we like it, but we don't understand it. And it is, therefore,
that the purpose of highest potential is to transcend limited thinking and bring it into superhuman or cosmic consciousness.
You have a step process.
In this series, we will be unlocking the deepest mysteries of our human potential
that leads remote primate ancestors to a confrontation with what Rudolf Otto called the holy other, the holy, the numinous, the transcendental. And
for deep healing,
this is on slightly less firm ground, but in my own personal experience and having collected psychedelic experiences lifelong,
our potential to access the supermind is no longer simply theoretical. How can we hack our history to change our future? I'm Ben Stewart. Welcome to the nexus point between your old life and your new self. Welcome to Limitless.
Once I grew, it just made a lot of sense.
I've been watching it for years.
I listen to him almost every day.
Through YouTube videos.
Put it so simply.
I love his no-nonsense approach.
I feel like I stumbled somehow.
I always wanted to meet him ever since I watched the videos.
Doing the program with Frankie was a very, very powerful experience. It's been amazing. It's been an amazing experience.
I brought the tears.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Depression started going away. I started feeling better, joyful.
The need of sleep reduced.
Physically, it has helped me to be more flexible.
The biggest thing for me is clarity. Now it's there.
Very realistic for the modern day working professional. This car is necessary. It's necessary.
Beautiful.
Charlie, excellent.
Well-being, rejuvenating.
Author of the new book, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. More to the Trump haters in a second, Kimberly. But yesterday, there was so much primarily in the press about Tim Morris. He's going to come out and spill the beans. He's the NSC guy who's actually on the call. In fact, he came out and said that there was nothing illegal in this line that went on. Total disappointment for the left. So for all the bluster, have we heard of any high crimes and misdemeanors? Any evidence of that at all?
I can't find any evidence, David. I mean, you would think, given the Democrats' very strategic leaks.
Hello and welcome. Our topic today is hallucinogens and culture. We're going to examine the way that various cultures throughout explore and with me, the co-author with his brother Dennis McKenna, of a book called The Invisible Landscape, Mind, Hallucinogens, and the I Ching. He's also the co-author of Psilocybin, Magic Mushroom Grower's Guide. He is the author of a computer program called Timewave Zero, and he's the co-founder and president of an organization called Botanical Dimension, which devotes itself to save botanical, for our discussion, would be the and one of the world's early religions. The Rig Veda is considered by all scholars, I think, one of the most composite of religious hymns and deep philosophical discussions. And yet when one reads the Rig Veda carefully, one discovers an enormous emphasis on a mysterious, apparently hallucinogenic substance called soma.
Yes, you're quite right. The ninth mandala does not know what soma is or was. Gordon Wasson spent a considerable portion of his life researching this problem, to the conclusion that soma, that is symbiotic pine and birch trees throughout much of the North Temperate Zone. However, scholars have cast doubt on his identification of soma. Nevertheless, what we learn from Watson's scholarship is that plants with hallucinogenic chemical principles in them have had an enormous impact on shaping the psychology of various plants with hallucinogenic chemical principles in them have had an enormous impact on shaping the psychology of various cultures, both pre-literate and literate, throughout the world.
It seems quite clear that the references to soma into a plant
sort of plant substance was prepared and ingested by a priesthood who then used the ecstatic experience of the universe. The case of soma is my own field of interest was the Amazon basin, where we don't have great written literature, but we do have an extensive and a tradition of hallucinogenic plant use that persists to the present day. Psychedelic religion touches the lives of millions of mestizos and Indians in the basin. It is a combinatory drug, which makes it especially interesting to pharmacologists because its two principal ingredients are themselves inactive except in the presence place, is one of the challenging questions that anthropologists of plants. How then did these so-called primitive or pre-literate people make the connection between the combining of the bark of one with the leaves of another boiled and put through a number of procedures to produce an intense, extremely interesting, and to this day unanswered question.
Isn't it the case that the chemical active ingredient in ayahuasca originally named it telepathy?
Yes, that's right. Based on field reports of the states of voodoo telepathy. Now, the rules of scientific nomenclature are such that the first name of a compound is always given precedent, and about 20 years after it was named telepathy and named harmony. So today, the active ingredients of ayahuasca are known as harms into the Amazon basin, was the fact that the people seem to be taking in order to social plans relative to migration, hunting, and warfare were under a continued persistence of the feeling that telepathic group mind states are induced by this particular plant mixture, and if go are in fact found endogenously in the human brain. These are not exotic compounds from the point of view of ordinary human brain chemistry. So there is compounds brain active human potential.
I would imagine that many of our viewers have seen the movie The Emerald Forest, which seems to deal with the use of substances of this sort in the Amazon culture.
Yes, John Borman did a wonderful job with that movie. He was portraying the use of Emptiness snuff. That's a hallucinogenic drug complex that is part of the Amazon drainage, and in rural Venezuela, Epina contains DMT and is blown up the nostrils by a cooperative friend and exists in the Amazon.
And there's also telepathic-like experiences, or clairvoyant types of experiences.
That's right, and DMT, at the most intense of the hallucinogens, DMT, which you mentioned, are the ones which are most closely related to our brain chemistry. So far from these physical brain, what they really represent are the shifting of ratios of compounds already present in the ordinary brain.
Well, DMT, I believe, is dimethyltryptophan.
Tryptamine. That's right.
Tryptamine. It's related to the protein tryptophan, is it not?
It's related to the protein tryptophan. It's also related to serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
Serotonin is a neurotransmitter which occurs in all and most concentrated in the higher primates and most concentrated there in man. It is 5-hydroxymethyltryptamine. So there is a very close structural affinity between this extremely potent exotic hallucinogen.
Other cultures around the world have also used other types of substances. I think it might be interesting to talk, at least briefly, about alcohol, which is referred to so often in the Bible, for example.
Yes, well, we tend in our culture to make a radical distinction between drugs and foods, with what we call spices sort of falling somewhere in the middle. Point of fact, largely over diet, there has not been a human culture that did not bear upon it the stamp of its relationship to certain plants, which altered the individual and mass psyche of the 19th century. Or the way in which the British manipulated opium policy in the Far East, or, as you mentioned, alcohol, which has always been the drug of choice in Western culture. Who can imagine modern industrial office culture without coffee? These are major drug dependencies that have placed their stamp on the lives of millions and millions of people. It's simply that we choose to linguistically define it in such a way that the effect is not something most people are cognizant of.
I think coffee is a very interesting example because when it first introduced into our culture, as I understand it, was considered virtually a hallucinogenic drug.
Oh yes, when coffee was first introduced into Western culture, it was associated with certain establishments where loose women and loud music were available, and the bohemian literati would gather and drink coffee and talk into the night. And it was considered quite a risque thing to be involved with. That's right.
And wasn't tobacco also viewed that way initially?
Yes, tobacco is a very similar case. The anthropologist Eduardo Luna has pointed out that tobacco, which had a history of millennia of use in the New World, was within 100 years of being introduced into Europe through Portugal, was being buried in the graves of Arctic Lapland shamans. So it shows how the character of the drug discerned the Lapland shamans. So it shows how the character of drug is quickly discerned by a culture, even a culture.
In the early 70s, when there was quite a wave of psychedelic drug use.
Yes, that's right. Following upon the discovery of LSD by Albert Hoffman in the late 30s, and then the writing that was done by Aldous Huxley, Metzner, and others, it became a fad of the self-exploring youth culture of the 60s to be involved with these things. The time of great social other reasons. And the end product of that historical episode was the complete psychology field that potentially psychedelic drugs could be for psychology, what the telescope became for the science of astronomy. The problem with the psychedelics, they dissolve cultural programming, and hence inherently have a political charge about them. You see, culture is the product of the unperturbed human mind, into which it then secretes itself, sort of live perturbation of the mind. And the perturbed mind, this tension between cultural values and what we might call, for want of a better word, reality, creates a tension between institutions and the users of these substances.
It's as if our culture, if I understand you right, acts as a filter between our minds and direct experience of reality, and the drugs somehow blow away that crust of culture and allow more of a direct agnostic experience.
That's right, and the business of culture, any culture, models, and if the hallucinogens have not been integrated into the cultural model, and they are definitely seen as dangerous forces for an unpredictable sort of social change. Now, if the hallucinogen plants have been integrated into the cultural model, this is not then a problem. And this is the case with shamanism. Shamanism is the culturally sanctified institution of inner exploration via psychoactive plants, institution of inner exploration via psychoactive plants, where I'm vitiated to rely on ritual or ordeals or other methods of eliciting ecstatic states. But to my mind, and this is a great argument which rages in anthropology, to my mind,
and
the hallucinogenic plants are
listening to every word and how he says it.
An authentic shamanism. That's right. Now, Mircea Eliade, who is the great commentator on shamanism, took an entirely different point of view and said that reliance on what he called narcotics was a decadent thing. It's personal history. I think it can be clearly seen that this was simply the cultural myopia of a European scholar in the great 19th century.
But to be with thousands of incredible patriots who put their faith in God, family, and country.
4 days from now, the state will get to the polls and vote to continue our extraordinary progress with your next governor. Republican, please break down. Under Republican leadership, jobs are booming with your next governor. Republican, please break down. Under Republican leadership, jobs are booming, confidence is soaring, wages are rising, crime is falling, and our nation is
Turning down sound.
than ever before. We're now
Some music. Relax. It's not so difficult.
Thank you.
Have you ever watched Trump? This is facial expression, just turns out so, oh yeah, there you go. Doesn't mean he's not smart. That's so somebody did it once. No? It's like, oh, I unfortunately. It's like, so oh, really? No, I was a big fan of George Carlin back in the day. Personally, like I'm not into that.
Well, yeah, he's the one. He's the artist that I'm plugging right now. Because his truth applies more now than it ever has. Because it's got more of an edge, right? It's plain. No. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Critical thinking. There's a lack of it.
Well, the great one that's being used right now from materials. It's like, just because it disappeared doesn't mean
Yeah, exactly. We could be on two sides of this coin at the same time because that's how coins work. There's two sides to it. Except if you in the casino, same. It's rigged. You gotta see it.
just because it disappeared something doesn't mean we can't be friends, right?
No, and it doesn't mean that you can't debate fervently either, like with passion. You can do that too, but no sense to get angry about it. Find the best solution. And if maybe you were right at one time and now it needs to change. Maybe it's just that. Maybe you just didn't keep up as much as you thought you did. Or maybe you're so far gone that we just put you on an island and live out your days in Florida, because it will be an island. Yeah. And they can keep their money.
That's terrifying. Actually,
that's true though. It's true. You see it all over that region.
It's like you're like oh, I want this, just because they can mess up doesn't mean a person can't live their life.
Yeah.
Now, if it was a name for their Holocaust, I feel different. Right?
Well, then Scott, you're in one of the best places in the world, because it wouldn't take much to gather a community like this around, and this isn't even a target, right? So, what's the fear, right? But we got to get our government in place. These guys take 75% of our earnings when you calculate it all up. Yeah. I misquote everybody.
That's like democracy.
Yeah.
It's the worst kind of government, except for everything else.
Except for all the other isms. Marxism, Leninism, whatever. It's the same. Because because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
That's why communism was
Yeah, and you know what? Any one of those isms could work, right? If the central principle was compassion and unconditional love. It's pretty simple.
It's really weird how
yeah.
It's completely left, and then there's a point where it's like
yeah, because there's a balance in theory to it, right? It's a flaw, right? That's the fatal flaw, is that you have one person or a very select few people in charge. So now it's like this socialist state there. And that's what US is going toward right now. So it's very important we cover God in this. Watch them.
I actually just started watching the series
Oh yeah.
And basically, where right away it was point blank, we're like, oh no. It's like you will be rewarded if you follow the process, right? And you're like, well, lead time was 36 people fish died, but it's worth it because life response.
Yeah, not only ignorance, but lack of doing anything about it.
Well, when the reaction was the guy that was in charge, people were really looking in the radio, not shut down, really looking at some exposed basically.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you will. You're like,
yeah. The arrogance or what is it? The pure like brashness of it, that you can bald-faced lie about something that's right in front of you. Oh, you blew that up, huh? No, you didn't.
Well, because I'm deeper the way that that should go up later on, but like that is wrong.
It did. And you know it. Yeah. You know it too.
It's
Let me.
I watched it.
Man, we gotta talk more. I got a live stream going on Instagram, and it's covering my YouTube thing here right now, and covering Trump's speech live on PBS. You know, public broadcast, right? They got a back seat, but
I was working at a hotel.
Yep.
But I thought just when I got off, it was like the migration numbers used to be CDC on Facebook.
Yeah.
So it was happening. And finally, I found out and a lot of it's some like fun stuff. And finally, since like raise your hand, like.
Yeah. And you remember it started out you and me? Somewhat. You were in my second play. All my sons.
Yes.
You were in my second play. It's, how many? 14 years.
14 May, the reason why is because that's the weekend.
Yeah,
and unfortunately I know that.
That's right. That was shortly after I had Gracie, and then I went out, looked for Josh on the river for 3 days. Yeah, I remember. It was an interesting time because it made you think. This kid, when you rank individuals, you know, like where they're at genius levels, right? You could see it in him, right? You could see his genius. Yeah. Okay, so he was a quadruple threat in so many ways. He could probably add many more. Very talented, singing, dancing, comedic abilities to pause and be real. It's incredible. And then what?
Because there's another guy, his name is John Richardson, and I'm going to show his book. And he knows about Josh. John Richardson is 2 years old.
Yeah.
And this year was is we were doing the shows in the hotel.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah, the monopoly on the costumes. Yes.
And
Smart.
Costumes, and Josh was going to do all of what they're from. I was in the show.
Who was this guy?
His name is Josh.
His name's Josh, too? Okay. Josh Richardson.
He looks a bit like him.
Yeah.
And I guess let's put the costume on unintentionally. I guess like Harry and the unintended Josh.
Oh, really?
He had absolutely no idea.
Yeah.
And so he's talking to Tyler, Tyler Evans.
Yeah.
And so I think we're at the best right. See it, don't you? I'm like, yeah. This is weird stuff. That is that guy.
What was his last name? Josh?
Josh Morgan. Josh.
Yeah, Josh Morgan and Josh Richardson is the guy who knows. Josh Morgan is the guy that
yes. Oh, yeah, I better run back.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
quit. I said, see, this is easy. This is easy. But, you know, it just worked out that way. But Biden said, I never met the people. Never met the gentleman. Unfortunately, in about 10 seconds, a picture came out where they're playing golf together. But he never met him. So now you'll ask him, you say, no, if we were together for 3 hours, they're paying my son millions. But the press protects him. Watch this Tracy Anderson go to third grade, lousy grade, third grade person. But listen, CNN the world. They like just, they don't like it. You know, it's tough. You fake CNN. No, it's tough. I tried not to do that because the light on. You know, when the light goes on, that means you're live. No, that means you're live. And every time broadcast for a while, but here's the thing. They have the guy up there saying that they're fake, that they're liars and cheats, that they're phonies. It's hard to be broadcasting that when you're talking about the network that has you on, right? So we understand. The lights off. And then, remember this. Anderson, what a beauty. He used to interview me. He was so nice. Prior to running for politics, he was so nice to me. It was like they were love fists. And I don't want to. He's weak. He's a weak person. But they're all weak. Let me just tell you something. Honesty with our people. Really honest. Because the New York Times, the Washington Post are going by. We threw them out. And they came into my office, and then I got to get back to this guy. Where's Hunter? Where's Hunter? You know, we have a t-shirt big. Where's Hunter? Where's Hunter? Poor Hunter. He then came out. He did the morning show. That was the last we've seen of Hunter. That wasn't good. The morning of his father's very bad to me. So before I say the final thing, we got rid of the Washington Post and the family New York Times. We don't have another legacy. People can go out and buy them, but we don't have them. We used to have them stacked up, and I go in and I'd see a meeting with my people, and they're dealing with China, or South Korea, or somebody. And I go in and I'd go into these offices. I'd see like 10 or 15 of them packed up all over the place. The Washington Post, New York Times, I keep trying to figure out who's which. And, you know, one day it's
it was the order we did 13 years ago. This was 19 years ago.
There you go. That's that. There you go. That's the man. Holy crack, man! You're old, and you were so young. You were like 17.
It must have been spring, summer of.
The other thing, if Obama would have done it, because look, this guy built the caliphate. It was the size physically of Ohio.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
7 million people.
That's fun.
And they were the ones that jumps and called a lot of the parents after we did this. And I talked to them. They were so thrilled that we got this out. They were so thrilled. But you know what? And you know what? We don't do it. We do it because it's right. That story was a massive story. It was the biggest, maybe the biggest, one of the biggest ever. Bigger than anything.
No, they don't get it. They get this.
But if that were, if I
They
were
only
a
get this.
If I were a Democrat, they'd be talking about that story for weeks. With me, they don't even
You don't get that.
they actually played it out.
These guys don't get it.
I'm happy about this. Tony, the dog, got more publicity.
They don't get it. These guys.
And Conan's coming to the White House. But it is true. Did you ever see a story disappear so easily?
Live at the Front Street Starbucks in Starbucks Country in Penticton, British Columbia, Canada. Hi, my name's Tommy Cowles. Just covering live right now. The President of the United States. Try a few things. Turn off the sound and watch him. See how he comes across. Then maybe turn off the visuals and then listen to his words and how he says it. It might give you an indication of where his heart is, at least.
Was any human being by these people, these horrible, horrible people we have to deal with? Anyway, just to finish. So Hunter then goes to check it out.
So right now he's just basically
About the day.
He's basically
Somebody else, and would they like to have
criticizing.
You give this son who has zero experience with investing, you give $1.5 billion.
We'll get back to the other screen so you can see.
Biggest guys on Wall Street.
He's basically full of shit. Moving to Florida. New York doesn't want him. That's a pretty bad sign, I would imagine.
It's a payoff. It's a payoff.
He's a greedy
and how
man.
would you like to have
This guy.
Sleepy Joe with the son getting all of this money?
And we have to ask ourselves if we want to be led by greed. Send him to Florida. Let him live out his days with the little he has. It'll soon be underwater anyways.
Billions and billions of dollars. We're taking billions and billions of dollars.
They're taking billions and billions of dollars. That's what he's saying.
You know what we're doing with some of it? Just a small portion, but 100%.
The only thing they care about
Like $16 billion last year.
is money.
And $12 billion
Economy.
here.
Short-sighted.
Because they targeted our farmers, because they know the farmers love Trump and Trump loves the farmers. So they targeted them, and they put the $16 billion down to practically nothing. And they thought our farmers would say, "Oh, we don't like Trump." They said, "We know he's doing the right thing because we've been ripped off for so many years." But I said to Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny would do a great job. I said, "Sonny, how much did they spend buying our corn, seeds, all our agricultural product?" He said, "Sir, $16 billion. I said, "Good, I'll make it up. We're going to have a lot left over." So we will have, pretty soon, $100 billion in money paid into the United States Treasury by a country that never gave us 10 cents. They only took.
So, I'm just covering right now the president's
So
speech
when I
live.
said to the farmers, we're going to send you $16 billion.
The heck of it.
It's been split into $12 billion.
Watching the way he says things.
I mean, think of that. $28 billion. I said compliments.
Watching how.
And we had a lot left over. Not bad, right?
What he says about
You
himself.
think Obama would do that? I don't think so. You
Self-absorbed
think
he
Hillary
is.
would do that? I don't think so.
How much he
You
places
think
blame
Sleepy
on
Joe
others.
would do that? I don't think so. He would
How
know
much
what you're
he
talking
calls
about.
people names. Sleepy
On
Joe.
Tuesday, the proud people of Mississippi will send Democrats
How much he
a
focuses
clear
on
message. It's
pride.
very important for this reason, as well as the fact you have a great
Tribalism.
gentleman in your midst.
Make
You have
America
to
great
reject their
again. What does that
extremism
mean?
and their socialism and their corruption. They're corrupt. Adam Schiff.
Think about it. Possibly it might
You
be
know, when he
important.
gave that phony speech where he made up a really horrible speech and said that I said, "Oh,
So,
I'm going to sue him." He said,
My
"Sir,
name's
I'm
Tom,
sorry."
and I'm coming to you live from the Front Street Starbucks in Penticton, British Columbia, Canada.
We have a forum. We have a place we can talk.
Currently just covering the PBS coverage of
But this is why we have to
Trump live.
and why you have to make tape reads.
I'm also on YouTube. The sound's not that great, but we work with what we got. I have a microphone, but now we're going to leave it.
He's loved and
As long as
respected
everybody's
by
okay
the
with
current
it.
governor.
Comment if you like. If I don't get back to you right away, I will get back to you
I wanted Phil to run for
as
Senate.
shortly as I possibly
And I
want
wanted
to.
do something I've tried to get him. You know, some guys,
Love you, B. You're my new friend. You're both from Canada, right? Canada.
And he said, no,
Still
sir,
Canada.
I've been doing it, I don't
Who doesn't love unicorns? And the show is also brought to you by, hey, let's try a little glass of wine.
But Phil is great. But I'm going to introduce Phil in a second. But take
Tea.
Reeves. Phil endorses and
You
views
want
as a
tea?
champion.
All right.
And really a champion for
Where do I find tea?
Mississippi.
This is very important.
Cut your taxes over
Must
50
find
times,
tea
including
cup
the largest
or
tax cut
coffee cup.
in Mississippi history.
I believe. Oh, maybe I have it already in place.
Tate is pro-worker.
No.
He's pro-jobs. He's
Ah.
pro-family.
Tractor.
He's pro-life.
You're welcome.
Tate is a true leader in the fight to protect the unborn. The other side is not.
I don't know what
Tate
you.
Reeves will support our police, oppose sanctuary.
We all do what we gotta
love
do.
our police, right? I love our
When we're doing it.
love our
Well, it's not that bad.
You'll
Like one
oppose
glass.
sanctuary cities,
Good
which
for you.
is just terrible. They're terrible. And Tate will always defend your Second
Too much of
Amendment.
anything is not good.
So
Moderation.
Tate's running against
the
a
key.
liberal Democrat named Jim Hood.
This is for you, Queen Bee.
Now, what I know about Jim Hood is he fought very hard to elect crooked Hillary Clinton and Barack Hussein Obama.
You can also have this.
He
This
wanted
is yours.
Obama to win so
Now,
badly,
if you'd
and then
like
he
it,
wanted Hillary to
this
win.
can be yours. It's yours. Have it. I don't need it anymore.
He's supported by extreme leftists like Stacey Abrams.
Thank you,
who, by
Starbucks.
the way, went down to the
Thank you.
a terrific gentleman from the great state of Georgia, Brian Kemp. And they came in with all, they brought them all. They had President Obama, they had Michelle Obama, they had Oprah Winfrey, they came, and all he had was Donald Trump. And we won fairly easily. But Stacey Abrams wants to give illegal aliens the right to vote. Do you believe this?
Have it all. It's all yours.
I mean, some of these people, they want to give them education, they want to give them this, they want to give them free healthcare. They want to give these people that come into our country illegally more advantage than our own citizens have, more advantages than our own military has.
Your fiber down there. Someone
Jim
picked it up.
Hood wants to raise your taxes.
Good for them.
He
That's
supports
awesome.
taxpayer funding for abortion providers. He supports illegal immigration of all benefits. And he opposed our travel ban, which is so important that we want in the United States Supreme Court to keep terrorists the hell out of our country. And Jim Hood went to the United Nations and opposed your right to self-defense. If you don't want a far-left Democrat running Mississippi, wait a minute, how is this guy? You know, I can't believe this is a competitive race. It's like embarrassing.
I can't believe it. I don't think that he's going to be the right guy. I think the guy that you want is Tate Reeves. He's going to be fantastic. He will be a great governor. Tate, come on up. Tate.
So now that we got a taste of that, then we put it in the back of our brains, digest it for a little bit, think about it, see if that's the kind of guy that you want to be stuck with for the rest of your fucking life. Yeah. The 10 chickens in Canada have gone. Give me the first ticket to Holland. I'm going with my left hand this time. Let's see if I can do it. Can I capture the fucking sun with my left hand? I think, yeah. I think I can. I know I can. Catch the sun with my left hand. Jazz hands. Jazz hands. Catch the sun. There it is. You have to look for it. Look. Oh. Got it. I wonder if there's anybody out there. I wonder if anybody really fucking cares. Oh, here goes. I care. He cares. I think. Maybe not. We'll see. What does that require to carry? Nothing. It's free. Good photos. Got an hour and a half for this location. Try to keep it going for more photos. There it is. So, go to Facebook. Gonna pay some homage. But not really happy with their product. That's gonna have to change. Right. But who cares? I'm small potatoes. They don't care about us guys too much. But maybe your view is just really unpopular. That's a possibility. That's a very distinct possibility on so many different levels. But we press on. And comment. You being comment. So we get 3, right? I'm gonna go do math. I'm really smart. Posting picture. Basically, because I'm really into myself. Where is it? It would seem that my computer is bogging down. I have a lot open. Let's see if I can put some stuff. I got it streaming now. Need that open. I don't need iTunes open. Take that. Cost money. I don't have any money. Boy, I wonder if I could get paid for these services. Probably. Does anybody really get paid on Instagram? I don't know. Does anybody want to trade on Instagram? Oh, that's a better deal for everybody. Everybody wins. Trade. Trade ideas, services, things. No money, no intermediary. had money and were just invested in gold and silver and all that. Maybe they'll lose it, but they were greedy to begin with. Cautious, maybe some, but come on. How much money do you fucking need? How much do you need to really pass down? Everything's working. Accordance. Still a long time to download one picture. Check up on something else. It's not important. Live stream. Still going on YouTube. What are we covering here? Oh yes. Let's see if this man is still going. So you can go online on PBS or this that everybody's core. So go there, spend some time, or unlearn everything that you know. Go back to the roots. What do we want? When was it good? When did we have it good? Has our history been rewritten? Have we told the truth in our educational systems? Are our politicians working on our behalf? Are our religious leaders, do they care about your soul? Or do they just simply want your money so they can continue the fallacy of it all? Yep.
Your next Secretary of State,
People
Michael Watson.
on stage that wholeheartedly always
Your next State Treasurer, David McQueen.
a job position, leading a fear of
State Auditor, Shad White.
well,
Agriculture Commissioner, Andy Gibson. Insurance Commissioner, Mike Feeney, and former Governor, a man that nobody's ever heard of in this room, I'm sure. But the truth is, a legend in politics, and a great guy.
Florida,
a great guy. Haley Farmer.
Do something
great guy. So with the help of everyone here, we're the hottest economy in the world. We've created over 6.7 million new jobs since the election. If I would have said during the campaign that I would create 6.7 million new jobs since the election,
my left hand.
they would have said horrible things. They would have said it's impossible. Unemployment is reached the lowest rate in over 51 years.
Yes, I can.
Soon to be history. African American unemployment just dropped to the lowest rate ever recorded historically. Really unimportant to me. The African American youth unemployment rate is the lowest. 55,000 Mississippi residents at poverty.
Try to play it at equal volume to the music, what he's saying, what I'm saying, on all devices. Oh, can't do it.
Under the previous
didn't bring the mic.
We lost 16,000 factories in our country. Under my administration, we've already added nearly 10,000 new factories, and many more are coming in as we speak. To get relief to working families, we passed massive tax cuts, on average $2,000 to $2,500 per family, bringing almost $1 trillion back home to our shores. What's happening? You couldn't get the money. The big companies, they couldn't get their money back, both bureaucratically and from a tax standpoint. They brought back almost $1 trillion now because of us, all put to work. We slashed the largest number in history of job killing regulations. And we ended the war on American energy. We are now the #1 producer of energy by far anywhere in the world. For decades, you saw corrupt politicians take money from lobbyists to impose catastrophic trade.
So,
Mississippi lost 40% of
just
all
to
manufacturing
bring
jobs
this
after
live.
the twin disasters of NAFTA and China's entrance into the World Trade Organization, two of the worst deals ever made by our country. 100,000 Mississippi jobs
out of
were
everything
walked
they
away
have,
just like that.
so that
And
he
that's
can have
awful
more,
and a big price to pay for Washington's
and we can have
disloyalty
less.
to the American worker. That's what it was. It was disloyalty, stupidity,
So if this is
corruption,
what you want,
lots of reasons. But now you finally have a president
more of
who
this
is
you'll
loyal
get,
to you, and I am.
because I'm not fucking stopping. So I have a son.
I'm a fighter for your job, your wages, your factories, your families, and your dignity. We're stopping China from ripping us off. We're stopping all of these other countries taking advantage of the United States. We lose our money, we lose our wealth, we lose our jobs, we close our factories. That's not happening anymore. It's reversed. We were the sucker country years and years, but we are not the sucker country anymore. They all know it. We're replacing NAFTA, and that was a disaster, NAFTA, with the brand new U.S., Mexico, Canada agreement. If Nancy Pelosi will ever put it up to a vote, which is questionable. Nervous Nancy. She doesn't want to give the people of our country a victory. She's very busy doing other things, having fun. The USMCA will be a massive victory for Mississippi's farmers and also includes powerful protections for Mississippi auto workers, manufacturers, and everybody else. It's a great agreement. About time we got rid of NAFTA. The do-nothing Democrats need to stop their madness and pass the USMCA right now. The last administration's horrendous Trans-Pacific Partnership would have destroyed the U.S. Parliament. But I proudly, first thing, withdrew from that job-killing calamity.
That's interesting.
Under our policies, Toyota has just announced a $170 million investment in Mississippi and 400 new jobs at its facility. Did you ever hear of this place? Before my election, our leaders used the great American middle class as a piggy bank to fund their
Very
delusional
interesting that
global
I've been
project
going
all over the
live
world. Take care of other people, we take care of other countries, but we
for
don't take care of our own. They knowingly
2.5
decimated
hours
American
and
manufacturing
have gained
to promote
absolutely no
economic growth
traction.
in foreign countries.
But that's
They
okay.
deployed our military
I got a
to
backup
protect
plan.
immensely wealthy nations, subsidizing
Who
their
is this
welfare
guy?
states with your money. I asked this wealthy
I
nations.
ask you,
I respectfully the other day said, "Give it to me."
is he someone you want over for stew?
And he was great. No, he was great.
But all he's gonna do is fuck you too.
He was great. He said, but nobody has ever asked me. I said, but I'm asking. And billions of dollars will come in. And we're protecting a great ally. We have a country that spends millions and millions of dollars in our country buying military and other things. But we can't. You're very wealthy. And that's true in many countries, by the way. That's true in many. They never respected us. They could never believe it. I said to one country, I have great respect for the Prime Minister of Japan. I said to him, my greatest